Hello, welcome to the studio. So tonight we're going to be painting that guy right there, Baby Yoda. Who doesn't love Baby Yoda? And to do that, I'm going to be using my Mission Gold class watercolor paints. Here's my swatch chart so I always know what colors I'm working with. And I'm going to be using my Mairtini brushes. Here they are. I love these brushes. Pure gray squirrel hair brushes. Wonderful. So I'm curious to see how it turns out. Let's check it out. All right, here we are on our painting surface, and as I said, I'm going to be using my Mission Gold watercolor paints, and then put my swatch card up on the top. There are my paints. Going to move a value painting up to the top so I can see that when I need to refer back to it. Everything else I'm going to refer to the color picture up in the corner, and I'm going to start this painting just by throwing some nice green color on Baby Yoda. A nice bright light color of green on him. I think that's going to be a nice way to start this. And there we go. And what I'm using is just a little bit of sap green, a little bit of permanent yellow, maybe a little bit of ochre there, just to get some colors on. And I'm just going to put that on everything that is his skin, that is everything not his eyes or his jacket that he's got on. So I'm going to put a nice light layer down there. Now the paper that I'm using here, I don't know if you can see, looks a little different than paper I've used in the past. Oh, here I'm just putting a little bit of a red tint. It looks like he's maybe got a little bit of red or a warmer color there right around his eyes. So I'm just going to drop in a little bit of color there, and you can see those colors just blending together nicely. But the paper that I'm using to paint Baby Yoda on is a scrap of Arches Watercolor paper, 140 pound. And I don't know if this is rough or if this is cold pressed, but this paper is pretty rough either way. If you've watched much of my channel before, you know that I have been using a lot of wood pulp paper that I have laying around, and so now I'm trying to step up my game with a little higher quality paper. But the paper that I've had for quite a long time, and I don't remember exactly what the surface texture is, and it's been a long time since I've used Arches paper, so I can't say for certain, but it is Arches. So I'm just dabbing a little bit into his ear there, a little bit of rose madder. You can see there's a little bit of warm color inside his ears in the reference photo. I want to match some of that in my painting anyways. And now while his head is wet, I can come down and just begin to paint a little bit of his jacket, a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of raw sienna, just trying to get a neutral tan on this painting, or on his jacket I should say. And here we go. Just going to put that on. Again, a nice light layer. There we go, and just put it on everything. We'll worry about the details in a little bit. But the base layer covers everything in his jacket, except his collar. I'm not going to paint his collar. I'm going to save that and do that a little bit later. And the reason for that is, well, the reason is I'm not exactly sure how I want to handle the texture that's on there. So I'm going to handle it by putting it off until I have to tackle it. I'm going to handle it by not handling it. So there we go. My original intent with this was to paint down to about where I'm at right now and not a lot further. But I kind of take it down almost to the edge of the paper, which I suppose is fine. It is not a big deal. There we go. And now what I need to do is stall and wait for the paint to dry a little bit. It should be coming up very quickly. I've sped this video up 3 times. It was, close to 2 hours long. And I don't know that even I could stand and listen to me ramble on for 2 hours. So I've sped this up quite a bit, and we've got it down to about 40 minutes. Have no fear about that. It's going to be a riveting conversation the whole time. Okay, so I've got one layer on Baby Yoda here, and what I want to do is come back and start putting on another layer. That's going to be everything that's just a little bit darker than the highlights that are on his face. So I'm going to drop some of those on. And I'm trying to start, oh boy. Look, I've already got my wrist in some paint, and I put a big spot right up above his head. I put a big spot over there. Stuff like this happens. I'll get it out of there by the end of the painting. You will see. You won't even notice it. What I was going to say is I'm going to try to start on the left-hand side and paint towards the right so I don't get my hand in everything, but I guess I've already failed at that. That's okay. That's okay. Stuff like that happens, and you know what? If it were to happen inside the painting, then it would just become a feature in the painting. The fact that it happened outside the painting in the background area isn't going to bother me. We can quickly take that off. I've got a secret on how to do that. It's called the magic eraser. Just go over it and it'll come right off. So not going to worry about that at all. Okay, so here's the second coat in his ear. Just a little bit to start to add a little bit of dimension to him. And mixing up a little bit more. These are just my 2 colors. I'm working with Hooker's Green and Sap Green. And when I need to add a little bit of color, if I want to warm it up, it's a little bit of burnt umber or maybe burnt sienna in there. If I want to keep it a little bit cooler, then I dab in a little bit of blue or maybe just a little bit of ivory black, but not much. I don't think I need too much in there. All right. You can see he's got a highlight area right there. Kind of. That's his part of his jaw, and his face really is kind of bisected in half. One half really in bright light and the other half in shadow. I'm just going slow to make sure that I can kind of see what I'm doing. But I'm going to fill in everything that looks as though it's in shadow, which is basically everything on the right-hand side, his left, my right-hand side. Over to maybe the top of his ear over there. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to leave just a little bit of a line around the inside of his ear so that my 2 colors don't touch, and I'll come back and get those. And it just touched. That's okay. We'll take care of it. We have happy accidents. Nothing to worry about. Nothing we can't take care of. We're just going to keep right on rolling here and see what we can't do. There we go. Look, easily taken care of. No big deal. And now I'm going to just, with 2 hairs and some air, as Bob Ross would say, I'm going to soften up a couple of these edges here. I certainly don't want these to be too hard. And if they run into that little bit of highlight area, that's fine too. Not going to worry about that at this stage. There's plenty of time to go on this painting. We're going to touch all of the areas that we're on right now, so we don't have anything to worry about. There we go, just blending in right around his eye. And again, it's just barely any water on that brush, just enough to take away that hard edge and soften it up just a little bit. All right, he's got a kind of a ridge there in his ear. I'm going to highlight that a little bit. I'm going to lighten it by painting a little bit darker on each side. There's one side of it, and blend that out, and here's the other side of it. And it might seem like it's a little too bright at the moment, but again, I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to come back and we'll touch this ear a number of times yet, so there's plenty of time to fix and correct. No, fix is not the right word. Correct is not the right word. To readjust what we've done. There we go. And so we're just going to continue that shadow all the way out and just leave that brighter area right in the center. It's a little too bright. We'll just put a little bit of green on there, make it a little bit smaller. And already it's looking a little better. And now I can look around and see, are there any areas I need to darken a little bit more? A little bit more of my green. I know there's a little bit of warm color in there. Just a touch of the burnt umber, I believe, inside that ear. It looks pretty dark right now in comparison to the reference photo, but don't worry about that. We all know that watercolors dry quite a bit lighter than they appear when they are wet. All right. I think I can let his face sit for just a second while I readjust and get ready for, well, maybe I can't. Maybe I gotta play with it just a little bit. And now I need to get ready to do a little bit more on his jacket. There we go. One line on, I guess it's a zipper underneath there. Maybe it's buttons. Maybe it's just held together with the force. I'm not really sure. And that's where it's sewn on the other side. I'm going to blend that out. Just want the instance of a line in there. All right, a little raw sienna and a little burnt umber. And I'm going to be a little bold here, and it's going to look a little strange to begin with. Just looking to see where the shadow's coming from here, or where the light is coming from. And I'm dropping in some of the really darks on his jacket over here. I'm going to blend a little bit of that out. There we go. And as I said, it's going to look a little strange here at the beginning, but I promise you that by the time we're done, we're going to have a nice Yoda painting. Oops, there's a little bit on the inside of his cuff. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side, a very dark mixture. And we'll just put that on, and if we have to blend it out a little bit, we'll blend it out. But we want to get that dark shadow in there, the big creases on his jacket. There we go. And I will say, as I'm doing this, I will say I am a Star Wars fan. I've seen all of the movies many, many times, but I have not seen The Mandalorian, where Baby Yoda comes from. So I'm a little disappointed. I don't have Disney Plus, so I don't know when or if I'm ever going to get to see The Mandalorian. I suppose it'll come out on some other platform, but I don't see that I'm in the near future going to be getting any opportunity to see Baby Yoda. All right, there we go. He's got a little bit on his eyelid up there. He doesn't have big lids, but a little bit on his eyelid. And again, wherever I see it, a dark area, not necessarily a big shadow, but a dark area, I'm just going to put a little bit of color there. Right, and even Baby Yoda up there has a few wrinkles on his head. I did notice he doesn't really have all of the hair that old Yoda has. Or I guess I don't even know if we call him old Yoda. Just regular Yoda. Normal Yoda. The Yoda we all used to know and love before Baby Yoda came along. Darn you, Baby Yoda! No. So I'm just taking another look to see where I've got some darks. And since his head has dried, it's gotten lighter. And I can go back in and reapply another layer of dark color back there to put my dark values back in. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Wherever I see the transition, I'm just going to soften that edge a little bit. I don't want it to be a stark transition from one area to another. Just a nice light transition. And without finishing this up a little bit, yes, it looks a bit odd. I don't know who said it, but a very wise person, and it was not me, said one time, I heard or I read or somebody told me that watercolor paintings oftentimes look quite strange until almost the end, until you start putting on some of the finishing touches, and then they come together in no time. It appears as though that's what's going to happen with Baby Yoda here. He looks a bit odd, but he's going to get there. We're just going to keep working this painting, keep putting on some colors here and there, checking the reference image, seeing where a few more darks would make a little bit more sense, what darks will make the lights stand out a little bit better. Just like inside the ear right there, it's going to really put some dark in there. Actually, that's some warm dark. That's some green with a little bit of burnt sienna in it. Maybe just a touch of rose madder also. A nice warm color, but look, now that ear's got quite a bit of depth to it already just by doing that. Dry my brush off again. In those immortal words of Bob Ross, 2 hairs and some air, and that will help blend that right out. He's quite dark in here, so I've mixed a little bit of indigo in there. It's got a really dark area. There we go, and in that little corner, you can see you can see now that the addition of those darks are starting to give a little bit of detail to his face over there. Kind of that area, his jowl maybe. I know it's a little high for his jowl, between his chin and his ear. I'm not sure what that's called. I guess I'm not totally up on my Yoda anatomy, so I can't say exactly what that is. But again, I'm just adjusting the value on this ear. I'm looking at the reference photo and seeing what I think it needs to go through to make it where I want it to be. So it looks like we've got some depth and definition to that ear. All right, so I've got 3 puddles of greens here. The one on the far left is sap green with a little indigo in it. A bit darker. In the middle is some sap green with a little burnt sienna, and on the right is a little sap green with sap green, which basically is what that is. I should say I've got hooker's green in there too. It's not all sap green. Most of this is a combination of sap green and hooker's green as I look at this. All right. Oh, we've got a nice brow ridge starting to extend through. You can see it right there. If I darken up underneath it, maybe it'll really help that show up. Just a little bit of blending, and if I just let that darker color come out to the side, you see I don't bother doing too much with it, then it adds to a little texture on his head. And there we go. It's got a little point there. Kind of reminds me of the Count from Sesame Street, that little point that I just painted, but A little dark under his eye. There we go. And the left side of his face, or the right side, his right side of his face, our left, really taking shape there. Looking good. And that brow ridge, let me just pull that right back. And I'm going to make a little space under that eye, lighten it up just a bit. All right, mixing up a dark green here again. Thinking what I need to do, taking a step back. All right. Yeah, I should have done this when I was working on that ear just a second ago. It's just too light for what I want. I darken it like that. It really makes it look like it's got a cove in that ear, and that's a dark shadow on underneath part of it. There we go. And I'll probably blend that down. Or not. Maybe I'll just leave it like that. Okay, now back to his jacket. And you see those darks that we put in that were so dark aren't that dark anymore. That's how it happens. It lightened way up. So we're just going to put them right back in. That's fine. We know that that's where we want our darks to be. That's why we did it like that to begin with. And we don't want too hard of an edge, so I'm going to soften that a bit. There's a little bit on the inside of his jacket. You can see back there, back behind his hand, that little bit there. On the inside of his sleeve. And I'm going to start adding some color to the rest of his jacket now. Now, this is where you really need to stay with me because it's going to look crazy here in a couple of minutes when I get this on, but stick with me. It's going to come out. It's going to look good in the end. Here we go. I'm just putting in a shadow underneath his collar there, that big fluffy collar he's got. So that was just straight burnt umber under there just to make it a bit darker. There we go. And I'm putting some color on here and there. And yes, I understand it looks a little cuckoo bonkers at the moment. A little Van Dyke brown to give just a little shadow. I want that zipper area to be just a slightly different color. I want it to stand out on its own without having to do too much work for it. All right, and I'm going to give a little bit of a hand here. There we go. There's one finger. There's a second finger. There's a finger, and I think I'm going to have to leave that. I've got 2 fingers yet to do. Yodas have 3 fingers on each hand. Now, I told you I was going to fix his ear, and I'm doing that, just darkening it a little bit. And as I'm looking, I can really darken my shadow area here. I can make my darks much darker. This darn watercolor keeps lightening as it dries. Why does it do that? Well, okay, well, it's always done that, Michael. You know it does that. But never mind, I knew this was going to take several layers to do. The more layers I put on, I think the more depth I can get on him, and it's going to look as though it's just a gradual blend from one area to another and be really nice and dark over there. Come on, let's get that off of there. Little spot on top of his ear. It's a pretty wet wash. I put it on just a little bit wetter than I wanted to, so I've got to take a little bit of it off. And I'm going to let it dry a little bit. Just drop a little shadow line on the fingers that I have painted. There's one, here's another one. That's done. And before I get too far into it, I'm just going to soften the edge there. And I think that dark really helps provide some depth for his the roundness of his head there. Yes, it's probably darker than it is in the reference photo, and I'm okay with that. All right, now let me fill in his eyes here. So I look at his eyes in that reference photo. I don't know if you can see it. What would be the whites of his eyes are brown, and then he's got black pupils inside of those. So I'm going to start by painting his entire eye brown. Of course, when I go to paint black, it will cover up the brown of his eyes. I don't have to worry about that. And now my finger paint has dried. I can put another finger in here. There's one, and I've got one to go. That one's kind of curved over a little bit. And a finger. Good deal. All right. All right, so now the next thing that I need to do is, well, it looks like I'm going to play with his nose a little bit. I'm not really happy about the way the roundness of his nose is turning out, but I can't deal with that at the moment, but I can deal with a few other things. Well, I mean, I guess I could deal with it right now. But from watching the video, it appears as though I'm not going to deal with it right now. Let's say it that way. All right. I think I'm going to, I'm just going to continue to try to soften that edge up a little bit, brush that back. Like I said, I had quite a bit of water in that mix, maybe a little bit more than I wanted. Maybe the water, or maybe the paper underneath was not quite as dry as I thought it was. And now I'm going to set it down for a day. Whoo! And I'm back. Okay. Now I've got some decisions to make. How do I deal with Baby Yoda's collar? How do I finish his head? And, well, how do I finish his eyes, really? And what do I do with his jacket? So here's his collar. His collar is going to be nice and easy. It's yellow ochre, maybe a little raw sienna, and just a touch of Van Dyke brown, I believe, just to keep the color rather muted. It's definitely going to be lighter than the jacket, which is exactly what I want. It can be a little darker on the side I'm on right now, because that's going to be, basically the shadow side. There's no light, or not as much light, shining there. So this is a little mix of ivory black and Van Dyke brown. I'm going to drop that in, and that's going to be the texture on the collar here. There's, just drop a few of those in here and there. A little bit more on the right hand side, a little bit less on the left hand side. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to call that good. Now, the rest of what I need to do is fix the rest of his jacket. And in looking at it, I like it. It looks a little cold. I'm going to warm it up a little bit. And I'm going to, again, darken a few of these areas of deep creasing in there. And not too much of it. I don't need much happening, but I do want to make the rest of the jacket more of a uniform color. If I glaze over the top of it, it's really going to draw the whole thing together, and you're going to see how that happens here pretty quickly. But our big creases are going to get another layer of this Van Dyke brown in them, and then my mixture of a lot of yellow ochre, a little bit of raw sienna, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna in there, and just put that on, and that's going to help to warm the coat up. And I'm going to put that on everything, and it's going to help pull it all together. And I promise you, it's going to look like a nice jacket, even though the way I left it yesterday, it kind of was a mess. So now you can begin to see the method of my madness. I put that on, and this glaze really is unifying everything and giving it a nice level coat. And